Hello, for our Claim of Value project, we chose the topic of the 30-meter telescope, specifically the conflict of constructing the telescope in Mauna Kea, Hawaii. This is a presentation by myself, Brandon Natividad.
And Tucker.
Elian, Zurita.
And Quinton, Wong.
To enter a brief project overview, the project has been around for almost 2 decades, with history in Hawaii over a decade, with tension and protests being faced for almost over a decade that has completely halted construction for now. The first stakeholder that we cover is governments, and that will be covered by myself and Turdad. There are four partnered countries: China, Japan, India, and Canada, all through scientific research institutes and departments that are both internal stakeholders, both financially funding the project, but also helping in the research and development of the project. They're really interested in the new breakthroughs and discoveries that can be made through the 30-meter telescope. Some of the concerns: the project has been started for over 2 decades with no real future at the moment, as the protests have constantly delayed any type of construction. There have been propositions to move the project to a secondary location. However, because Mauna Kea is the favored location due to the TMT effectiveness on the island, it is still in contention to move it. Their background: they have deep history in leading the scientific research for their respective countries. They have uh, about a decade or over a decade long relationship with the TMT project itself, especially in a lot of the technologies, helping to create the new technologies that are necessary for the construction of the TMT. Important values. They A lot of these countries really value the completion of the 30-meter telescope, as that is what is most important, as this will be what decides how the future of astronomy will go. When the value of the location varies a bit, we see three different takes on the situation. From India, they understand that if they tried to continue, there would be problems. From Canada, they want to try and respect natives, especially with their history. And then Japan really prefers the location, again, due to Mauna Kea's natural aptitude towards the telescope. Lastly comes into the importance. The importance of the construction has a great effect on these organizations and the field of astronomy. A lot of the research possibilities will be brand new, with a telescope of this size not being common anywhere. A lot of the job opportunities for each of these organizations, as there's both people who have to go out to the telescope and collect data, but also what is it, analyze that data and create findings. And lastly, an investment return. Each country has invested both years of time, but also hundreds of millions of dollars, which they are seeking to get a return on in the completion of the project.
Hi, my name is Elian, and I'll be presenting the university side of the stakeholders for the TMT project. So official partners of the 30-meter telescope include all the schools within the University of California and the California Institute of Technology. I would consider both of them to be internal stakeholders, as they both publicly fund the project and have direct involvement with the development and design of the telescope. So if it weren't for their support, the telescopes wouldn't be able to be constructed, which is why their support is essential. So the next question goes as to why they would want to support the construction of the telescope despite its controversy surrounding location and intrusion of culture. Here I have the main values, really, which is opportunities, exploration, and discovery. And here in the scope, we can see that they want to study the stars and other objects throughout our solar system, the Milky Way, and neighboring galaxies. So these schools are mainly interested in finding answers to sought out questions about the universe itself, like the nature and evolution of the universe and search for life on other planets. Here we have a quote from the University of California Observatories, where they emphasize revolutionizing and understanding as one of the main aspects behind the construction and their support towards the telescope. So next we go into backgrounds as to like what makes them qualified to work on the TMT project. So basically, both schools actually have plenty of experience with past projects as they are research institutes and, quote, a world leader in astronomy and astrophysics research for them more than 125 years. So one of the most important projects that both schools collaboratively worked on through is the Keck Observatory Telescope, which is currently one of the world's largest optical and infrared telescopes. So both Caltech and UC played roles in the development of the telescope as they helped develop the cameras and spectrometers. So these schools are arguing that they could use their past experiences and developments used while working on the Keck towards the TMT. Okay, so moving on into investments, both of these schools have involved millions of dollars towards the project. We can see that the UC has actually invested 68 million, and together they're planning to raise 100 million to match funds from another foundation known as the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. And judging by these investments, we can see that the UC feels it's important to support the scientific mission of TNT so they could peer like into space for deep answers to fundamental questions about the universe. I guess this quote really ties it together, like as to why these schools want to involve themselves into the telescope, which is once complete, the TMT will be the largest and most powerful land-based optical infrared telescope on Earth.
Hello everyone again, my name is Quinton Wong, and I am here today representing the Native Hawaiian. First of all, I'd like to explain the term kia'i, which means guardian or protector in Hawaiian. As kia'i, Native Hawaiians believe it's both their cultural and lineal responsibility to protect their culture, and Mauna Kea is beyond sacred to Hawaiian culture. Prior to physically protesting, the kia'i have also engaged in other forms of discussion regarding the development of TMT, including letters, testimony, and legal challenges. And their three main concerns are cultural, legal, and environmental. So as previously mentioned, from a cultural standpoint, the mountaintop is especially important to Native Hawaiians who believe that Mauna Kea, among many other things, is to be a place for the gods. And the current actions taking place suggest to Native Hawaiians a lack of concern for their own culture. Legally, Native Hawaiians believe that this development of TMT violates Hawaii's constitution as well. The Constitution cites that the state reaffirms and shall protect all rights customarily and traditionally exercised for subsistence, cultural, and religious purposes and possessed by descendants of Native Hawaiians. And while a court ruled that TMT does not violate this clause, the Native Hawaiians disagree, citing religious practices such as praying to the gods there, placing umbilical cords on the mountaintop. Camille Kama, a Native Hawaiian civil rights lawyer, notes that while TMT may bring economic development to the state as a whole, it's unlikely to bring long-term benefits for the Native population. And now on to the environmental concerns. There is a considerable lack of oxygen at the mountaintop, with even current employees citing experiencing fatigue. Furthermore, there are already 13 telescopes present at Mauna Kea. And to give you an idea of the impact of telescopes as a whole on the planet, the annual carbon footprint of astronomy's research infrastructure is equivalent to about 20 million metric tons of carbon dioxide. The EPA recent environmental assessment also suggested to TMT to consider other locations to build the telescope, explaining that it has the potential to result in disproportionately high and adverse impacts to Native Hawaiians. Native Hawaiians have also been pushing for TMT to seek out the Canary Islands instead. First of all, TMT already has the land and licenses for the Canary Islands in Spain, with Mauna Kea being only notably slightly better. The Canary Islands also has nearly complete support from the telescope from both the government and its citizens, and the difference between the two sites in terms of effectiveness is minuscule. The discussion of TMT represents the larger issue of historical injustices in Hawaii, including but not limited to the seizure of the Hawaiian Islands and the government by the US. This also speaks to a concept in Hawaiian culture known as aloha aina, or taking care of the land. Native Hawaiians aren't against the telescope or science itself, they just don't want the telescope on a place that is so deeply sacred to them.
My stakeholder is the TMT International Observatory, or TIO for short. So to begin, I will first discuss the investments and values of the observatory, starting with the economic investment telescope itself. So, as shown in the diagram, each of the various components of the telescope are paid for and constructed by a variety of governments. Thus, one of the primary concerns for TIO is completing the telescope, thereby satisfying the needs of the contributors. As stated per the website of TIO, their goal is to advance our understanding of the universe while still serving the community. While science and its progression are the first and foremost concerns of TIO, they are not completely unaware of the needs of the community. As stated here, the site for the telescope was chosen carefully, bearing in mind the cultural significance of the region and the demands of the local population. Next, I'll just transfer into talking about the scientific implications of the telescope, and which is integral to understanding the position of TIO. So the telescope is composed of 492 mirrors, which are each movable, creating an adaptive optic system, which allows to change the shape of the mirror to adjust for different light levels and produce clear images at those light levels. If constructed, it would be the most powerful telescope of its kind on Earth. This would give access to before hidden regions of the sky, and its implications to the furtherment of astronomy are rather immense. As stated in an article from the New York Times, the ability to image exoplanets may lead to a discovery of evidence of extraterrestrial life. So the telescope wouldn't be simply a passion project. If constructed, it would seriously progress our knowledge of the universe. So if you wouldn't mind going to the slides once more. So there's just a few diagrams of the telescope and some quotations. So last I will discuss the environmental impact that the telescope could have. So according to the Department of Land and Natural Resources in a report from 2017, there has been no evidence presented that the telescope would harm the local environment. However, this has not been completely accepted by the local population, and further research has been requested. As of July of 2022, the National Science Foundation started an investigation into the environmental impacts of the telescope's construction. So while there is no initial evidence of the telescope being harmful, caution is still being taken. So to conclude, the TIO has been understanding of the local people's needs, building on a site with no specific cultural significance, and is being mindful of the environment, as well as producing a telescope that would greatly feed the planet.
So now we come to the decision matrix. This broke down into cost, time, the effectiveness of the telescope, and the satisfaction of the native Hawaiian population. And lastly, will the telescope actually be completed? We broken down into 3 decisions. The project continues on Mauna Kea. The project is canceled, and lastly, that relocation to that secondary location. In all of these, we've concluded that the best option for the TMT project is the movement to that secondary location, as this satisfies the criteria of cost, time, effectiveness, native Hawaiian satisfaction, and completion the best. If you continued on Mauna Kea, the continued protest would just prolong construction even longer, with ways of construction likely again just ending up in a stalemate, and the cancellation of the project means all investments have no return, which is the worst case scenario for a lot of these internal stakeholders. So to conclude, we have come to the conclusion that the best option for the TMT project is to move to their secondary location in La Palma in the Canary Islands of Spain. And lastly is our works cited. And that is all. Thank you.